Theodore and Anastasia had been together for 6 years as husband and wife. She worked in sales at a car dealership, while he held a steady, if unremarkable, position as a mid-level manager at a logistics firm. Anastasia was always the dreamer, not in a head-in-the-clouds way, but driven, determined. She wanted more out of life: trips abroad, a cozy house in the countryside, and a level of financial comfort that would let them live without constantly pinching pennies. Theodore, on the other hand, was perfectly content keeping things just the way they were. He never chased promotions, didn't push himself too hard, and certainly wasn't in a hurry to shake up their routine. One evening, Anastasia brought up the future where they saw themselves in a few years. That's when she learned, to her dismay, that her husband wasn't interested in moving out of the city at all. "Why would we even need a house out there?" he shrugged. "All that time wasted commuting back and forth to work." She tried to explain, gently but firmly, that she didn't want to raise their future children in a city choked with traffic, noise, and pollution. For the first time in years, Theodore didn't just nod along, he pushed back. "Kids. I'm not ready for that. Honestly, we can't even afford them right now. It's just too much." Anastasia stared at him, stunned. "That's exactly why I'm busting my tail at work every month. I want us to be secure when the time comes, no scrimping, no stressing," she said, her voice tightening. "And maybe it's time you started aiming for a promotion too." But he just shook his head. "Why? Things are fine the way they are. If I push any harder, I'll burn out." That moment hit her like a splash of cold water. For so long, she'd believed they were building the same future, or at least walking the same road. Every time they talked about their plans, he'd simply nodded along. She had no idea he was never really on board. To say she was heartbroken doesn't even come close. From that point on, she started watching him more closely, tuning into the things she'd once overlooked. It didn't take long to realize how checked out he really was. While she chased goals and fought for a better life, he just existed. Go to work, come home, eat dinner, zone out in front of the TV, rinse and repeat. Meaningful conversations? He had no energy for them. In fact, it seemed easier for him to just agree with her than actually think things through. Caught up in her own vision, she'd missed the obvious. The person she thought was walking beside her wasn't moving at all. One evening, while Theodore lay on the couch watching TV, the usual scene, Anastasia sat down next to him and asked him to turn it off for a moment. "Oh, come on, it's getting to the good part," he muttered, clutching the remote. "This is important, Theo," she said quietly. Something about her tone made him glance over. Her face was pale, her eyes uneasy. That's when he finally turned off the screen. "What's going on?" he asked, sitting up a bit straighter. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I've come to a hard conclusion. I think we need to separate. It's become clear to me that we're not heading in the same direction." He stared at her, confused, trying to read her expression. For a moment, he thought it was a joke Anastasia loved to tease, and she was terrible at keeping a straight face. But this time, there was no laughter waiting behind her eyes. "Stacy, come on," he said with a nervous chuckle. "You're overthinking it. We're just a normal couple, nothing dramatic. We hardly even argue. Relax. You're just stressed." He reached over, gently pulled her toward him, and wrapped his arms around her. He held her silently, hoping to smooth things over without a fight. But in that moment, all she felt was how unwilling he was to really listen. She tried bringing it up again once, twice, maybe more. But every time, he brushed it off as just another one of her ideas. And with each dismissal, something inside her started to crumble. Bit by bit, she began to lose faith in the future they once promised each other. One evening, as Anastasia stayed late at work, Theodore's phone calls started flooding in one after another. She declined them all, sending just a quick text, "Can't talk right now." But that small message didn't ease his mind. Quite the opposite, a gnawing sense of unease began to creep in. His imagination ran wild, spiraling into scenarios he couldn't quite push away. Eventually, she picked up. Her voice was bright, almost giddy. "I'll be home soon. I'll tell you everything then, promise." When she walked through the door, she was practically glowing. Beaming, she launched into a breathless account of her evening. Some big-shot client from a taxi company had walked in during her shift and signed a massive deal for a fleet of cars. "You won't believe it, this commission's going to be huge. He just happened to show up while I was there. What are the odds, right?" But Theodore didn't mirror her excitement. His voice was cool, almost mechanical. This took all night? Her smile faltered. Are you not happy for me? The deal dragged on that long? He asked again, eyes narrowed. She stiffened, her mood now shifting just as quickly. It wasn't exactly a coffee break. Negotiations don't follow a stopwatch, she shot back. He just mumbled, next time, maybe keep better track of the clock, before disappearing into the other room. Behind that gruff comment wasn't just irritation, it was fear. A quiet, aching fear. Things between them hadn't felt right for a while, and now, suddenly, there were well-dressed clients, late nights, and laughter that no longer included him. The next evening, Anastasia came home on time, no delays, no excuses, but this time, she was holding an enormous bouquet of roses, the kind you don't just stumble across. Who are those from? Theodore asked, trying and failing to keep his voice steady. She placed the bouquet down gently. They're from that client, just a thank you for the service. That's all. Without a word, Theodore grabbed the roses and tossed them straight into the trash. The blossoms landed with a soft thud, petals crushed under their own weight. Anastasia didn't argue. She didn't shout. She just looked at him for a long, silent moment, then turned and walked away. That night, for the first time in 6 years, they slept behind separate doors. The final breakdown came swiftly after the flower incident. Anastasia no longer hurried home after work, and Theodore stopped pretending to care about her whereabouts. Their home became a silent battleground of unspoken grievances. Only once did Theodore manage to end this Cold War. When Anastasia did not return an hour and a half later than usual, he finally began to act. Opening their emergency tracking app, designed for real crises, he saw a blinking dot representing his wife's stop at an upscale restaurant in the city center. What he saw through the window froze him mid-step. Anastasia, radiant in the candlelight, seated across from a distinguished silver-haired man. Between them, a vase of fresh lilies complemented the half-empty bottle of Chardonnay. The man said something that made her laugh, a sound Theodore hadn't heard in months, before casually covering her hand with his own. She didn't withdraw. So this is how she lands big clients now, Theodore thought bitterly. The scene blurred as he shoved through the entrance. Does her wedding ring mean nothing to you? Theodore demanded, looming over their table. Several diners turned to stare. Anastasia's face flushed crimson, but her companion merely leaned back, assessing Theodore with amused contempt. That depends how long she plans to keep wearing it, he remarked, swirling his wine. Theodore's fist was already clenched when 2 security guards materialized behind him. As they escorted him out, he caught Anastasia's eye. There was pity there, but no remorse. She followed moments later, wrapping her coat tighter against the evening chill. What did you hope to accomplish? She asked, her breath forming pale clouds in the air. That man was holding your hand. Theodore's voice cracked. Do you have any idea how much You stopped listening months ago, she interrupted. I told you repeatedly this marriage was failing. You chose not to hear me. So this is your answer? Sneaking around with some. It wasn't an affair, she said calmly. Not until tonight. But I needed you to see what moving on looks like. The quiet certainty in her voice extinguished his last hope. The restaurant patron wasn't just a client, he was Anastasia's future, and Theodore, her past. The divorce papers arrived within the week. While Anastasia embraced her new freedom, Theodore nursed his wounds with equal parts guilt and resentment. Yes, he'd been neglectful, but did that justify her nuclear option? There were lines, he believed, that shouldn't be crossed until the ink was dry on the divorce decree.